All right, so thank you for being here, guys. I know we've been treating you so well. Wonderful location. Of course, we have Laurie and Gail. Where's Gail? To thank for this amazing, they never fail us. Every time I've been here, it's been incredible. But we also want to thank our wonderful sponsors that are supporting us. We can't do any of this without our great network of sponsors. Of course, Kumar here. Kumar, can you stand up just for us to thank you? GST founder of GST Digital, wonderful, wonderful man. He told me to say that. But also, and also Nadia and Tarek. Where's Tarek? KPN. Nadia and Tara are partner from KPMG, another great sponsor partner that we have for the event. But ultimately, this is really a great event with amazing site and speaker. And of course, we have the luxury to have two of our Northern California board member and one of our national board member on this panel. So this will be a very insightful session. So I'll pass it on to you.
Sweet. Thank you, Claudia. I too want to thank Laurie and the folks here. I actually found this place in the early days of Playground, the pre this stage, and I think that this place is a real treasure to, particularly to the Valley, because we don't spend enough time on physical sciences in the Valley. Everything's software, because it's capital efficient, blah blah blah, and I'm one of those people that actually likes hardware, and there are not a lot of us left, so we really appreciate what you guys do here.
And Jack just got nominated to the board of the National Semiconductor Technology Consortium.
Something like that.
Wow.
I like semis too. Semis are sexy now. But we're not here to talk about semis today. We're here to talk about something far more interesting. And we have some incredible panelists. Hopefully this report came out, when did it come out? Last week. It was, yeah. And it's a really good report. I really encourage you to read it. I really liked the tagline of oversight, insight, foresight. I thought that was really good. It's kind of like, it's kind of like past, present, future, right? And it's a really good way to think about governance, particularly as it relates to technology. And we'll ask our wonderful panelists quite a bit about that. To start, I thought maybe we'd do some quick introductions. Nora, I'll let you go first. Maybe you can just kind of talk about the commission too a bit, if you don't mind.
And who you are,
and
maybe
who I am.
too.
Okay. Anything else for anything? Anything else anyone wants to know? My name is Nora Denzel. It's like Denzel Washington, no relation yet. But I'm working it. So I spent all my time, my professional career here, at 4 different companies: IBM, HP, Legato Systems that got bought by EMC, and also Intuit. And I've been a professional kind of board member for the past, since 2012, whatever that is, 12 years. So I currently am the lead director of AMD and also on Norton LifeLock, and I just rolled off of Ericsson, and I've been on other boards. Okay, so I'm also on the board of NACD National. And every year, so is anyone not a member of NACD here? Oh, see, all right. So every year, one of the benefits, one of the benefits of membership is they put out a thought piece called the Blue Ribbon Commission report, and it's unique in the industry, I think, because it's for directors by directors, and so instead of giving you the answers, they give you the questions to ask in the boardroom and give you some advice and guidelines, and then you tailor it to your own needs. So this year, it was 24, we call them commissioners, and Laurie Yoler here was one of the commissioners. I was one of the co-chairs. And there's 24 commissioners and co-chairs, 2 co-chairs, 22 commissioners, all from different boards. From the World Economic Forum, we had people from Russell Reynolds from recruiting, we had finance professionals, we had investors, and we all scrimmaged a bunch of times to produce the report of the board's role in governance. So if you are a member, I hope you get a copy. If you're not a member, we do have a free executive summary that ChatGPT wrote that you can have, so. No, it didn't. It did not.
Hi, I'm Laurie Yoler, and I'm a partner here at Playground and have served on boards for a long time. I think I've been on 30 boards of public, private, and nonprofit boards, so I kind of love boards. But I really love board governance, and because I actually like to understand what I'm doing, I'm constantly wondering, well, how do other boards do this? How are things governed? And so this has been great. And I was on the Blue Ribbon Commission last year with Sunita, who's here as well, and it was on culture. And we had these great meetings where we talked about what are the things that board culture needs to have, and the calls were very nice and friendly, and everyone threw out their ideas. So I thought that this year was going to be the same, and I thought, Nora's one of the chairs, so this is going to be totally easy. I'll do a few calls and we'll be fine. But then I go to the first call, and no one agrees on anything.
Exactly right. And actually, so what we do, we're on this big Brady Bunch style Zoom thing. I was Marcia, and
Marsha.
it's important. Software. And so I'm supposed to facilitate the first session. I think it's going to be like 10 minutes max, because I really want to get to the breakout, get a smaller group, and really feast on a piece of, a question, so we can all, move on. And so we were given the guidelines. We had no title, but it was, what's the board's role in technology governance? And so I thought, just give me a real easy question. And I thought it was going to be so short, I said, don't even raise your hand. So that's how confident I was. And I said, what's the definition of technology? What should we? And these people are all handcrafted, curated. It isn't like people from the streets. I mean, these are people. And all of a sudden, it becomes like a scrimmage. It was like a flag football game, with no flags. Everybody's just running around. No one raised their hand because I said not to, and it was like an hour and a half. And so people were like, well, technology, that's really easy. We just talk about the technology that's germane to the company. I'm from a chemical company, so we talk about this. Then other people were like, well, it's not back office technology. It's only the technology that touches customers. Then others said, well, if it meets a risk threshold, we should discuss it. And then others said, well, no, if it's a risk, but it's a dollar amount, if it's a low dollar amount, then we shouldn't. And it went nuts of what is technology, what technology should the board put their nose in and their fingers out. I don't know if you were surprised by that. Well, you were surprised it was a free-for-all, but were you surprised about the discussion?
I mean, you look at the definition of technology, and it's something new happening in science or information technology, and so it could be a lot of things. To one company, it could be quantum computing and figuring out what's happening in quantum computing. Another, it could be a novel molecule or something that's being put together. So technology is this future thing, and which ones boards should talk about are going to be highly dependent on a whole bunch of different factors. And so I said, hey, SAP is technology too, so is that something we're going to talk about, and is that within this? And they're constantly trying to improve their software, so does this include back office software, or what does it actually include and why? And the other thing that hit me was the dollar thresholds. Well, if we're spending a lot of money, SAP implementations are really expensive, but sticking in this AI bot throughout your entire company may actually be free, but could have much bigger consequences, and so it can't be a dollar threshold. Anyway, all this Pandora's box got opened up.
Well, so that's an interesting question then. So if you take that to the next extension, a bunch of board members basically arguing over what technology is. So how do we figure this out in the boardroom, right? What do you guys think is the right approach to actually figuring this out in the boardroom? What technologies are really relevant to the companies?
Well, so the first thesis is from the paper was, it's really difficult to govern things we don't understand. And all of you use and understand technology, but there's been some recent developments in technology. And we made sure this paper isn't about, so one person said in the free-for-all, well, you just mean generative AI, don't you? And we said, no, we don't. We mean the combination of everything. They might even rename Gen AI. We want this to be long-lasting and the trend line rather than these headlines. Because Joseph Grumfeld said, the the corporation as a piñata. You don't want the board to say, what's your metaverse strategy? What's your AI strategy? And then tomorrow morning there's something new.
Crypto strategy.
Yes. And so point number one was everybody has to be on the same page. And then it's kind of tricky because management's coming up to speed as well as you are. So it isn't like you just joined a board of a semi company where everybody knows about semis and you don't, and then you're coming up to speed. With generative AI, some of the newer things, they're coming up to speed while you're coming up to speed. So it's really important to level set. So I think step one is, do we all have a working understanding of the technology that we're using inside the organization? And if there's something new, do we understand it enough so we can ask second and third level questions? So I think then you get clarity. And that's when you talked about oversight, insight, foresight, the oversight part is not having the free-for-all that we did, but having a clear statement of, this is what the board expects, this is why, and this is the technology we will govern, and this is what we expect. I mean, how would you say, where do you start?
It really depends, because in a tech company, how many of you are on boards of tech companies? Wow, not a ton. And non-tech companies? More. So how you have that conversation will differ dramatically whether it's a tech company or not a tech company, because if you're an early stage venture-backed tech company, for example, the entire board meeting may be about technology. It may not be about how to govern it, but it will often be about technology, and you may dive 10 levels down into the technology, but that's not necessarily governing technology. And so we can have these technical conversations forever, but there are a number of questions that come in on, are you doing it responsibly? And do you understand the data strategy? And so one of the other derailments, and I like to do derailments, so in the first meeting I said, well, how does this intersect with a data strategy? Because data's the new gold, and so technology, and many of the technologies right now are all coming about because we have more data, and so how do those two intersect, and how do we govern them differently? And do the folks who are talking about data governance, because we've all put in these data governance functions for the most part, are they the same people that look at technology more broadly, and who's actually looking at it? So
Yeah, I mean, and I know I have to rotate quite a bit.
And you're allowed to say what boards you're on too. We didn't even get to you.
I'm irrelevant. I'm the moderator. I'm on, so I do technology and non-technology boards. Everything's technology as far as I'm concerned. But so I'm on I was thinking of this as you were describing this. I'm on a board where I just had a meeting yesterday, and we spent most of the time talking about optical versus Ethernet. But that's not a governance issue. That's a product issue, right? And so it's a semiconductor board, and so it's heavy technical discussions. That's Astera Labs. I'm on the board of Box, so we have all sorts of data issues, and in fact we have an incredible product called Box AI that I use all the time, which is just an incredible way to deal with unstructured data and ask it all sorts of questions. I'm on the board of Global Foundries, which is a big semiconductor fab. So, if you want chips made, be nice to us. And actually, we came from AMD, so that was the original. We were the AMD fabs before when AMD went fabless. I'm also on the board of a company called Residio, which is security. It's security and safety stuff that came out of Honeywell. It was a spin out of Honeywell. And I'm on the board of a secondhand clothing company called ThreadUp. And so you've got this, technology has this incredible, every one of my companies has technology, we just use it in different ways. And I think that creates...
Sorry, I didn't
go ahead, Nora.
I interrupted. I didn't mean to. Okay, no, I'm working on it. No, I'm working on
Marcia.
it. All right, it's fine. Software. So you're absolutely right.
That.
Technology is like woven in everything, and it's rare people have a technology strategy. They have a company strategy, and then now when you're saying we're all technology companies, which we are, which technology is enabling that, and then how will we govern that crown jewel? So I think you almost every board panel you go to, it starts with this: what is the company strategy? How are we going to use technology to enable big pieces of it? And then you can parse out which technology deserves a lot of mention. So if you're talking about SCSI or Ethernet, whatever, But if they're going to use ChatGPT or generative AI to take 20% of cost out in engineering, that might be something you do want to watch to see, did we make those cost objectives? And if you're going to automate your customer sat process using bots and then redeploy your employees to do something else, then that you might want to govern if you're really a big consumer company. So I think in order to gain clarity, number one, you need to understand the new technologies that you don't in case your company does use them and brings it up. And later we can give you our pet things that, Laurie and I kind of swap stories of what class did you take, and we're kind of the nerds on that. So we take the classes so you don't have to, but you want to educate yourself so you can be good in a discussion on it, and then start from the strategy back, and then get the clarity with the board.
But that was one of the discussions in the report. If you're a non-technology company and you have one techie on the board, is it their responsibility to educate everyone else on the board and be aware of every technology that comes out and be the yippee voice in the board meeting saying, but wait, we should be thinking about NFTs or the metaverse or cryptocurrency or quantum computing? And are they responsible for training everyone else and putting together a training curriculum, which they're often asked to, much like if you had a cybersecurity expert on the board. And since Jack strangely often chairs audit, what's happening yet again with technology is, well, that's a risk, and so the audit committee should get it because they approve all the big capital allocations like the SAP implementation. So audit should look at technology because they don't have enough to do anyway.
Yeah. It's a pretty easy job. Yeah, no, I see this stuff happening all the time. I think, one of the things I think would be interesting to get your insights on is the way in which your boards are actually thinking about technology and it being addressed at board and committee levels, kind of on the agenda for your particular boards. And I know mine all actually do it very differently. So it'd be great to kind of get your insights on what you see that's been kind of best practices and maybe things that didn't work as well. And maybe Laurie, you can start.
One of the big problems if you're on a public board is the agenda is often already completely filled up and scripted out. Your audit firm has told you the things you must cover every quarter, and you have to approve the earnings announcement, and you have to have the cybersecurity education, and you have to, and then you're getting the readout from the committees, and then you maybe are doing succession planning, and you're maybe approving a dividend or whatever it is, and so suddenly your board meeting is completely full. And of course you want to meet a few of the new leaders who have recently joined, who might get promoted, and so the board's supposed to meet them, and the agenda's packed. And on my boards we keep extending the time just to get those things done. And so when are you supposed to cover technology? And it's not a burning issue for many companies unless something's going wrong, like, oh my gosh, we spent all this money on an implementation and it is a disaster, or we had a cyber breach, or some technology's end of life, and then, that's usually handled by audit as some crisis or some special committee. So how do you even put it on the agenda? And that's a big question that boards have to think about. And do you do a separate education session to get everybody up to speed? And I wouldn't say there's a one-size-fits-all, but starting to have the discussion of how do we make sure the board is completely educated on technology. And one of the things that I did was I sent the executive summary or the full report, if we were NACD members, to the whole board to say, hey, this report just came out. Here are the findings. What can we learn from this, and how do we get everyone level set in terms of their technology understanding? Because I always say, hey, I'm not a CPA or a CFO by training, but I've gone to lots of classes on finance for non-executives, and I constantly am re-educating myself. I'm not a lawyer, but I have spent a ton of time going to legal education. And so for my board members who are not technologists, what's the appropriate education for them, and how do we have that discussion?
Yeah, so from my experience, and I'll just combine all the boards together so you can't hold me accountable for anything I say. Anyway, we've modified charters because of this. So we were early on the Gen AI because we were doing doing some early modeling, et cetera, and realized that the contracts we have with our vendors have to change. We have to vet them like we vet employees, meaning like things we tell you, you can't use our data to go train someone else. We wanted to make sure that we trusted the vendors that brought in models, and we wanted to know how those models were trained. So we've changed everyone's charters. So for example, in the Comp and Leadership Resources Committee, that was all about talent. We understood if the predictions were right in terms of the headcount shift, that we would be redeploying people and be retraining people and upskilling people. But we also knew that there's going to be a disruption, and we wanted to understand how we were training and how we were recruiting, and what percentage of engineers should be new, which percentage are promoted from within. So we put that into the comp charter and the leadership charter. On NomGov, we talked about air-to-ground coverage on some of the important technologies. So it's funny with Jack here. So I view him as air-to-ground coverage, especially in finance. So you're all on boards. Some of you had P&Ls, some of you were ex-CEOs or ex-CFO like Jack. So when there's a financial discussion, they can go to the 8th, 10th level to really, really ask the questions, the 5 whys, the 25 whys when you're trying to do something. So as a board, we're covered. Not all of us can do that. We all can do this. Well, what did you do? Why did you do it? What's the risk? What's the worst thing that can happen? What's that? But then some can go a little bit deeper. But as a board, we have air-to-ground coverage with finance. And I think it's now time to look at our roster and say, do we have air-to-ground coverage in technology? And just like what we found with women on boards, or I don't know, if you put doctors on boards, if it's a pharma company, 3 seems to be the magic number. You can't be the only woman. And when you get 3, when you're the only one, they don't know what to do. When there's 2, they confuse you. Even though we look different, it'll be like, are you Laurie or Nora? When there's 3, then it just, because I've been the first, the second, and the third. And when there's 3, it's like, wow, there's a big mess of them. They actually are different. So I think the same with technology. You can't just say, well, let's just recruit for one. And then we had a huge debate of what is a technology expert. So I think of it more, and it's not an age thing, and it might not even be their degree. It's the aptitude, the acumen. And you kind of ask them, what'd you do this weekend? And when you listen, you'll know who they are. I kind of got a hint when we went through COVID. Some people were a little slower on that Zoom than the other. Like, where are you? Like, okay,
well,
stop.
And, just because...
I don't mean it negative. That was not judging.
Just because you had the degree from whenever does not mean you're keeping up. And so the continuous education, we're both weirdo addicts that we are on webinars, like on the Peloton, I'm also on a webinar, so it's always a problem when they say turn on your cameras, because it's like, you don't want me to do that, I'm on my Peloton. But constantly trying to get educated in lots of different areas, because things change so fast. So sure, I have a technical degree, but I've done a lot of things since, and I haven't coded for a while, unless you consider prompt engineering, technical. And so, how are you staying up to speed in all these different technologies?
Yeah, and it's going to be different for each company, I think, is one of the things that you kind of have to take away. I totally agree. I was thinking about all those people I know, Nora, that are just like that. When you have that technology discussion, you're like, oh, okay, your brain's bigger than mine. That's good.
No. Okay. Yeah.
So one of the other things that I found very interesting in the Blue Ribbon report was this discussion about where the technology discussion should be, right? And again, I've seen this in multiple different ways. And I'd be curious what you've seen works, doesn't work. Maybe some of your companies just aren't even talking about technology today. But just what you guys have found is actually good. And one of the things that, just as a plug for the report, there's a bunch of these toolkits in the back. So worth reading. It will help you think through, do I need a technology committee? Do I force the audit committee to do yet another thing? But I think getting your insights on this would be really great. Nora, you want to start?
Sure. Some of the lessons learned in the war stories, one board, they formed a technology committee. I think it was kind of like, 20%. Let's see, technology committees in the Fortune 500 have increased 20% year over year, and it's predicted we're going to see more. 75% of those companies, they have more than the 3 statutory committees, and then technology is one of the beyond 3. And so people said, you know, well, we better because we're high profile and we're this and that. And then they formed it and realized they didn't have enough skill to ask. They didn't even know what to do. So you don't want to do premature technology committee formation because it's just really not something that will work. But I think where the discussion goes, today, most things, what the paper, the commissioners were saying is most new things for a board, it goes into the risk industrial complex. So you get, and it should, because that's our role. So you get the lawyers, you get the whoever, the finance, all those people that just, you know them. And so they come in and they brief you, they try to scare you, so you pay money to get a report, and they try so that. But what we're saying in the report is one of the biggest technology risks you take is not embracing the upcoming technology because of the speed at which it comes out. And so the people, not me, from the semi world, we were on that cadence of every 18 months you double, that's Moore's law obviously, and it kind of throttled the usage. When I look at these models and then the newer technology come out with quantum computing, it doubles like every 6 months. And I don't think we're geared for exponential, like I learned that in the pandemic. Humans cannot get the concept of if there's only one person infected, how many will be infected in 30 days? I think exponential growth is very difficult. So where the discussion should be, one thing I think when we talked about oversight, insight, and foresight, the foresight one, I think you should have a what if with your company. And a lot of the companies think, oh, please don't bother me. I'm so busy delivering the current year or our 2-year or 3-year plan. But we should ask, how is the whole industry going to be disrupted? And what are your deeply held beliefs about the semiconductor manufacturing industry that are no longer going to be true? Because I definitely see disintermediation of our partners. So for example, in one company we had a language translation partner. So after our software was done, we sent it out and then they would translate it to, I don't know, 22 different languages and we pay, it takes 3 weeks. Now we don't even use them at all and it takes a couple of hours. And so we looked through the whole supply chain. So short story long, foresight says you should have some time on the agenda where you just kind of blue sky, what will it look like? And there's some amazing reports out there where people, they're not trying to predict it, they're just trying to jog you to say what it could be.
Have you thought, one of the things I've used successfully at a couple of my companies is we turn the breakfast or something maybe part of the night before into a discussion topic on this. Is this something that you guys have done before?
We've tried to extend the agenda because the other thing with boards is in order to be able to give people feedback of, hey, maybe you should be watching more of those webcasts, is building that relationship over the meals. But back to your question on structure, the interesting thing is on some of my boards, there wouldn't be enough people to have a technology committee, A, and B, there's a CIO who is not good at executive communications or a CTO who is so far down in the weeds, he or she would not have any idea how to interact and would find it a colossal waste of their time. On one of my boards, we do a board buddy, we rotate someone on the board with someone on the management team, and you meet frequently. And I had the CIO in one of my companies, and I met with him and I said, oh, hey, tell me how things are going in cybersecurity. I get a 200-page report showing every alert that he had received, and I'm like, no, I'm not trying to review your work. Give me high level. And then I asked, hey, high level, what are you spending on stuff that's, maintenance of existing systems versus stuff that's innovative, and how are you looking at new innovations in technology? And he looked at me like I was crazy for even asking the question. And so he would have had no idea how to run a committee like that. And so who's going to interact with that committee when you have it? And even in deep tech companies, they may be very deep in their area of technology, but not in others. And so the head of engineering is not going to want to interact with the committee to talk about the overall technology strategy and capital allocation and experimentation because they've got a product to deliver or a technology to get out. So it's going to be different, but it's worth having the discussion to say, how are we going to evaluate and embrace these new technologies that are coming out? And is it going to be at a full board level? Do we need a committee? Do we need a separate technical advisory board which for many companies, and I've served on several of them and found them incredibly valuable. But you bring in a group of experts and the executive team decides that this is really worthwhile, and it can be meatier than the board meeting. And there's a constant back and forth on what they need. So the structure is really going to depend and is not an easy one-size-fits-all. You know, it can be a subcommittee of audit, it can be a separate committee, or it can be a separate advisory board.
Yeah, and I think that's important, is you got to kind of listen to the audience of the board and then the audience of the management and figure out what the right fit is. I have some boards where I actually have an off-cycle cybersecurity discussion. 1 hour. There's a very structured discussion of what we need to go through. We try to avoid that report, 200-page report you were talking about, and that works really well. But what I found is that, ironically, the more technology savvy my companies are, the less likely they need a technology committee or some of the drilling down. Whereas my ones that are less technology focused, that's where like a technology committee can actually, at least in my experience, can be very helpful. It helps with products, it helps with infrastructure, it helps with a lot of things. I did remember one thing I wanted to tell you. One of the happiest moments of my life as a board member was, Nora, you were talking about the three, the power of three. When I first joined the board of Box, I was on a board committee with 3 women, and I was the only guy. I didn't like it. I actually loved it. And I said it was the first time it has ever happened to me, and it was really nice because you're right. I mean, you see the power. It's 3 people. You probably know all 3 people, and they're great people, and it was really nice. But you're right. Getting more people. When we start thinking about these skills matrix of what we're doing, we really need to focus a little bit more on technology, not as a whole, but like granularity of it. Exactly. Yeah.
One other thing, a best practice I'm starting to think might be going to be more prevalent. We don't rely on management only to educate us. And because we're reverent to the fact that they're learning along with us. And so we want to make sure we all have a common understanding. So we'll get education. We invite outside people to come into the board meeting or the dinner before. And so we'll get an expert or just someone in the VC world, someone that's closer to the subject matter. We all get educated at the same time and ask questions, and then we can discuss it as a team. We also ask management to send us things that they run across in their normal day. We did this well on Ericsson. What are you reading? So they had IDC reports and Del Oro and a couple things. And so the people that have no pets, plants, or children on the board, they're reading these, and they really enjoy it in between the board meetings. Some other people didn't. So you ask them for outside papers as well, and then that's in addition to the lifelong learning that you're doing by yourself. So my bigger point is, don't just press the management team to educate you, take time out of their busy schedule, get educated together, and then also do self-education and ask them to pass along things that aren't written by them that you could read as well.
So what are some of the best things that you found for self-education as a director? Let's
so
nerd
many.
out.
I love Andrew Ng's Coursera on Gen AI that Claudia made sure that Andrew made available to all of us. I think what he's done on Coursera is incredible. Oh my goodness, I am crazy. I go to all the free Stanford lectures and have many friends who teach at Stanford and spend a lot of time. Debbie Meredith and I over there, we were wanting to learn about biotech, so we were taking night classes in biotech for a while and the aging brain. And so I'm constantly availing myself of any kind of new development that's happening and figuring out how to get up to speed on it. But let's see, besides the Coursera, oh my goodness, I have a huge stack of books on my bedside, including Disruptive Leaders from Kumar, but I'm constantly reading. There's so many good videos, and the book by Mustafa Suleiman called Thank You. That one's really good. Just read that. But anyway, I'm a voracious reader as well.
I would have never guessed that.
So first, I put a little board of advisors in my head without telling them that they're on it. And so like Laurie, for
Do you
example,
pay
is
them?
one. No, don't pay. There's no pay. And they
Just
don't know. And then I can fire them. So you just get a cohort. So I know Lisa and Claudia have put together like a learning cohort for AI, and they've had excellent seminars, and some of them are on YouTube. In fact, there's one I recommend highly on the to be or not to be technology committee question. It was really great. Laurie did an excellent job. She was on the panel or she moderated. It was great, and you can find that on YouTube. So if you just search on NACD, you know how to do that. So I definitely think making a cohort, getting in a cohort, or just making your own cohort. Just ask the people that you are most like, what are they doing? Second thing, I think it's really important to take a prompt engineering class. I took the one from Vanderbilt, that's free on Coursera, or you can pay $50 to get a certificate, and it's called Prompt Engineering for GPT. I thought that professor was excellent, and you can take it at your own pace, and I went in thinking with a lot of hubris, like, you have a software engineering degree, I don't need this. Boy, it made me everything better. I can't stress enough just knowing that now I have a cheat sheet on my desk, and I can do things much, much faster, and I also understand the technology more. So I definitely recommend that. Like Laurie, so podcasts I do a lot of. I think Andreessen Horowitz does a really good job. If you want to go deep, Lex Friedman is awesome. You have to get used to him. He's an acquired taste, but he's great. He did a great one on the metaverse, which was it's really good, but there's other ones. He brought Jan LeCun on. He's great, I think, Lex. And I found today that there's actually generative AI where I can put in, and which I did, a whole talk, and it will give me not only the transcript, it will summarize it, and it'll allow me to ask questions. So what were Lex's biggest points? If I'm a technology director on Best Buy, do you think it's worthwhile for me to listen to this for an hour? And then when they give me the answer, they also timestamp it. So, and then Laurie found one.
Yeah, we're
tell us
constantly
this
looking.
one.
I'm constantly playing with every new tool that comes out. I love music, so when I read about Suno, I immediately started writing songs with
If you haven't
Suno for all
seen
my
Suno,
friends.
that is the greatest thing
It
in the
is
world. It's the
hilarious.
greatest party
if you haven't
trick
played
in the
with
world.
it's awesome. But yesterday, the headline said Google is finally having its Chat GPT moment with what tool? Anyone? Notebook LM. And so I took the Blue Ribbon report and fed it into Notebook LM, and it created a 5-minute podcast of two talking heads going through the key points. And then since poor
And then
Jack
she sent it to me because I hadn't read the whole thing yet.
I know, but he's so good. He's not only my Uber driver, but then I hand him the report and said, Jack, here's some light weekend reading since you're going to be moderating this panel. And of course, he's very good and read it all. But there
It's
are all these
fascinating, though, and I have to tell you, it's actually kind of scary, but it really is fascinating. You literally just put the report in, just a PDF, put it in, and next thing you know, you've got conversational podcast-like discussion. I actually told Laurie that after she sent it to me, I took an initiation report for one of my companies, analyst initiation report, put it in, and I got a 10-minute discussion on why you should or should not invest in this company.
I know, I'm thinking about creating it for all my boards and sending it to the CEO saying, hey, I just heard this podcast about the company. What do you think?
But I put all the financial analyst reports in, and then within 10 minutes, I have the whole summary, who said negative, who said positive, and then I'll play it off against what management does. But like Laurie, I think you should use as many tools as you can digest. I pay for ChatGPT, meaning that I get all the things that are in beta. And I recommend you try out Kayak. It's just like a secretary. You just say, hey, I need a nonstop to San Francisco before 10 in the morning, and I like Star Alliance. And it comes back with one text. None of this, it just comes back with one. Well, there's 2 flights. I recommend this because, it doesn't have coach or whatever. I recommend this, or this one you can't afford, so don't try that. So they have one for Instacart where you have a discussion about what you're going to make for dinner, and it'll fill out the cart, and then you can order. There was one to get your colors done, and which, Jack, I recommend. Oh, my God, that thing. And then it comes out with a whole color palette, and it comes out with makeup tips, shoes.
There's actually a really good one on ThreadUp where you can actually take a picture of something that you like, and it'll actually look for it in the 7 million pieces of inventory that they have on hand. And you can just type in, I want to look like, Meghan Markle, and it'll give you outfits that are in stock that you can do. There's a lot going on here is the point.
Yeah.
And you really do need to use these tools if you're not using them today.
Well, to understand what's possible, right? Otherwise, you have
Exactly.
no idea because your technologist will say, oh, well, that's not going to be possible for years. And it's like, really? Because look at this.
Yes, exactly. My LinkedIn picture is from Secta. So they do headshots, so you don't have to go to the photo anymore. And they give you hundreds, and then you're like, yeah, change my shoot, make my hair longer. Give me glasses, put me outside, make me look smarter. You can do whatever you want. They put me in front. The one on LinkedIn is a smart one because it's in front of a chalkboard, and I have my glasses on.
My Zoom picture is actually AI generated, and it was a party trick from a venture fund I was invested in a couple of years ago. They sent it out, and I looked at it and I said, I have never looked so good. I am going to actually use this as my Zoom photo. And everybody goes, wow, that's a great photo. I said, I wish it was real.
They said, who is that on your
Yeah.
Zoom photo?
Yeah. But there's amazing stuff. For example, I have I use Box AI quite a bit, shockingly. And I have a folder for all of my companies that has all the financial data in it. It's sitting there, it's under security, so no one else is getting it. And I can ask any question for, any analyst report, any board presentation, well, not the board presentations, but just anything that I put into these buckets. You start messing around with this, you're going to see how powerful it is. And you need to actually know what's going on. I want to just see if there's any questions out here. So we have any questions for these incredible speakers? Yes.
I want to follow up with what Nora mentioned about disruption. So some business models would be disrupted by, new technology, right? I guess my question is more, I was listening to Mark Benioff like not too long ago when he said, hey, SaaS will be completely disrupted, so they're trying to move to agent as a service. That's just one example. But he's Mark Benioff, he's from the technology industry, so he's more aggressive. So my question is more like for those companies who are not in technology industry, as they do the scenario planning and they start seeing that their business model might be fundamentally disrupted, but they don't feel comfortable to kind of like be as aggressive as, let's say, Mark Benioff saying we're gonna go agent as a service. So what is your advice with regards to those companies that they have started seeing that their business model would be disrupted, but they're not quite sure what to do with it because it's not yet disrupted, and maybe it might not be disrupted for a while?
I'll start, and then you. So I think that's a great question. I've seen a lot of different reactions to that. One good question a board member can ask is, if we were a startup today, well, how would we compete with ourselves? And sometimes your management team will be like, that's a board exercise. Then you just say, look, there's somebody down the street actually doing that. So they're doing it. So what would we do? So at least you have that discussion. Then there's also a risk appetite. There's one board I'm on, we decided we're going to be fast followers. So the board now knows, because I call it kind of a theory of the case, but it's when you tie out and say, look, this is what we're going to govern. So we decided we'll be fast followers, that sometimes the second mouse gets all the cheese, that right now it's too cloudy for us and we don't have the skill. So we're partnering better and we're keeping our eye out. But then the board knows not to keep asking management, where are we on this? Because we have a theory of the case. And so other boards I've been on, we start a venture group, not so much to make money, you hope they do, but so they can get close to the Laurie Yolers and the startups and what's going on in Silicon Valley, et cetera. So they start inching toward the newer things that are coming out and maybe get board seats on because they've taken an investment. So there's many different ways that you can buy, build, and partner, but it starts with a theory of the case. Like, what is it we're going to do? Are we going to be aggressive? Then there's going to be a big reckoning pretty soon, just like we had on the internet. And so will we take the risk to be somebody first to buy something that's probably overhyped right now, and then it might not pan out? Or are we going to be a fast follower and you're not going to yell at me if I don't do that? So what do you think, Laurie?
For me, I ask the question, what are our sensors out in the market? And maybe we're going to be a fast follower, and that's fine. But if we're going to be fast following, we need to know what's happening. And so it's great to rely on the analyst reports that we've always relied on, but we're going to have people out in the field who are, hearing what's happening. So walk me through the strategy of how we're ensuring that we've got sponges out, sponging up interesting things. And it doesn't have to be one size fits all, but hey, if there's a whole lot happening internationally and our head of ventures and corp dev are all focused on the US, who is out there reporting back? How are you gathering that information? And then when do we have a board discussion? When do we run an experiment? You know, the other question is, how are we running experiments? Either in R&D or with technology, what is our model for experimentation? When do we experiment? And how do we stay ahead? Because we're gonna have internal innovation, hopefully, but we're also gonna have outside innovators who we may wanna partner with, we may wanna acquire, we may wanna invest in, whatever it is, but let's walk through the strategy at that point so it doesn't become an argument on any one technology. But I send email frequently to my boards, and at first I thought they were going to be annoyed with me because I'll read a report or I'll see some really cool tool that I think they should be aware of. And on one of my boards that is not technology at all, I started sending emails, and the CEO responded back immediately, and his one line, "Please keep the cards and letters coming," which I thought, okay, this guy's awesome. He's not a technologist. He knows it. He's not particularly innovative, and he knows that he needs more input. And so that kind of allowed me to be sure and share it. And then the board found out that I was sharing it with him and the management team, and they got upset. So they said, "We want to be on your emails too." So I just send stuff along, but I think that was such a great reaction from the CEO to say, hey, I need all the sensors I can get. But it also goes back, because when it's something that their company's aware of, we'll see something here in deal flow where someone's trying to reinvent how to grow mushrooms or whatever it is, and I can send it to the company saying, hey, have you done research in this area? And they often have really good feedback. So it's a wonderful reinforcing loop.
So one of the things we've kind of skirted, this is an awesome discussion, thanks, but we've kind of skirted around is the oversight part of it. Do you have a sort of rubric by which you make a decision whether or not to apply oversight to some portion of the technology of the business? For instance, is it critical to the strategy? Or, you know what I mean? That seems to me to be, as a board member, the toughest part is to try to figure out, okay, I'm becoming educated. I think I understand what pieces of the technology make or break the strategy. What part of this do we need to check in on repetitively in the boardroom and keep our nose in?
There's a beautiful diagram of the Blue Ribbon Report.
Look at this. Look at that. Look at you. So we try to flesh out the oversight part, and then on what you're talking about, it depends. Everything always on a board depends, but sometimes what we say is, how do you measure success? And it usually takes about 6 months before we get KPIs we tie out on, because everybody plays the KPI game, or maybe they really don't know what KPI to use, because, you know, I always say the right question at the wrong time is the wrong question, meaning they're experimenting with something, it fails, and the board is pressuring, what's the ROI? I remember early in the internet, people were starting to build communities, and the board is like, why are you building a community? That doesn't make any sense. You know, you need to correlate it with the net promoter score, and, you know, communities don't make any sense. I remember one of our board members was on the board of Amazon, and Amazon at the time was selling mostly books, and Jeff Bezos said that they were going to have people review books that weren't book reviewers. And he's like, our board member said to the CEO of Amazon, why would anybody that's not getting paid to write a book review write a book review? And why would anybody read a book review from somebody that doesn't write book reviews? And was really against it. So I think you want to make sure that you just have a tie out on that. And then you just have to, I think the thing is, a lot of our cadences are year long, like the strategy, we used to have one of the meetings of strategy. Now we revisit strategy every quarter, and it's not that we totally adjust it, but we definitely are tacking, and it changes. We also went from like a yearly bonus to two halves, because it was so murky in terms of how fast it was going to go or how slow it was going to go. So I think the key is it's like any relationship, the communication.
And I think in oversight, Europe usually takes care of us in terms of regulatory compliance. So they started with data, right? And then now they're looking at AI governance. And so if you're in an international company, Europe is going to give you the framework for oversight pretty early on. But also the U.S. government, NIST is coming up, came up with a responsible AI framework, RM, whatever, yeah. And I think those frameworks are out there. They're actually easier because I think it's way easier, and I think the audit industrial complex is going to make sure that you've got the tools, because we look at our auditors and say, hey, you're supposed to stop us from screwing up, my friends at KPMG. And so we are expecting them to have a fabulous framework to help us. So I'm not as worried about that coming. Whether people actually use those tools and whether it gets to the technologists is another question, but I think the frameworks are out there, and I think Europe is mandating compliance for a lot of things, and a lot of the issues are around the data, right? They're around cybersecurity and they're around data, which there are some great frameworks on managing that right now. So I'm much less worried about oversight than I am the insight and the foresight.
Just one thing to add. I think this is going to change a lot. I actually think that in, 15 years, maybe 10, you're probably going to have like a SOX for some of this stuff, like AI. And there'll be assurance practices. KPMG will make tons of money off of it. But I think this stuff is going to evolve. So I think it's like everything else. It's like it's like Nora said. It's about communication. What's the most significant risks? Let's make sure that we're actually going after those.
I'll get better one. It was good. I'm teasing you.
So my question is around. My day job is in CPG, and the board I sit on is CPG. And I think when we think about innovation, we think about physical widgets, things we produce, right? We're very, very customer forward. And so I just would love to, unfortunately I haven't read this report yet, but I would love to get some insight. I have tonight to read it by tomorrow. I'd love to get your perspective, because on our boards, there's this sense that innovation is not coming from technology. And so it's not really something we need to think about. Technology is just, a bunch of B2B SaaS tools that we use. We think only about cybersecurity, but we're not thinking about how we grow the top line or how we innovate using technology. And when you try to push a bit, I've heard a lot of feedback around, well, we don't want to put material non-public information in these things because they could use the data. So I don't know what Box AI is like when it trains on your confidential data, where that data goes. But do you have any insights as to how you would gently influence in the boardroom to really push and think about some of these topics that appear very esoteric and not applicable to CPG companies?
So my best practice is don't try to do it yourself, bring in the experts. So ask your audit firm to come in and say, what is best practice and what are the new technologies that CPG companies are doing? Please come in and give us a presentation. Accenture, McKinsey, BCG, they will all come in for free and tell you about your industry and what all your peers are doing so you can benchmark against it. And then the cloud vendors, you bring in AWS, you bring in the Azure team, the Databricks, they all have teams now that are by vertical industry, and they will tell you, here is what all your peers are doing, and then you get to say, gosh, how come we're not doing any of that? Because if you don't make it specific to your industry, they're going to say, oh, that's what those weirdos in Silicon Valley are doing, that really doesn't apply to us.
Yeah, and there's good reports on CPG. Later, I'll give you a link to one. I would also sometimes I attend the conferences, like the Gartner of CPG or whatever. And so then I'm up on that, and I do a lot of reverse mentoring in terms of, it's usually the people at the bottom really know what could be done, because they just live this. They're not like us that have a rear view mirror. And so I do a lot of reverse mentoring, understand the topic well enough. So something when they say, well, our data would go in the cloud, there's an API for that where we're all using ChatGPT that's firewalled inside of you can firewall it in your machine and firewall it inside your firewall. So It doesn't have to go in the cloud, and that's been available for a long time. So having the expert, they can dispel those myths, and you can watch that happen in front of you.
But, on one of my tech companies, when ChatGPT came out, we were at a board meeting and we asked the CIO, so what are you planning to do? And she said, I'm locking it down across the company. And I'm like, oh, please.
Remember when we couldn't go on the internet at work? Did you have, oh my God, it was like, okay, right, that's not going to happen. Yeah. One thing back on the tech, I was piloting, it's called Recall, I think, on my Mac. And it's your whole, have you seen that where you, everything you've done, it records. And then I spend 3/4 of my time searching for things. Where's that email from Laurie that came last week, had an attachment, and she was talking about, San Diego. You just say that, and then it comes up. So it has, and then I learned how it worked. It takes snapshots every 5 minutes or 5 seconds, and then it uses AI to do the search. So I'd say, where's that coat? I looked at that raincoat. It was green. I think it was Nordstrom. It was on the web, and I really want to buy it.
It wasn't the boring
it
report
brings it right
or
back
the
up.
email from Laurie. It was, what was that really cool looking coat that I saw?
But then the thing is, now you have a file on your computer of everything that you've done for the past. It says that sometimes it won't record, like if you're using a private session on a browser, but now you have a file. So I think that comes back to, Laurie mentioned early, data becomes even more important. So some companies say, well, look, we're not going to ever sell our data. We're not Google. We're not a data company. But with these wrappers that you can put around your PC that takes, just records everything, becomes my memory essentially. We're piloting this thing where you onboard new employees and they can just talk to the app as if they're talking to a buddy, and they can ask things about, the employee handbook, what the CEO, where she eats for lunch, whatever. But all that data now is together. Like that was all like little pieces of shrapnel in your company, but the data that's locked inside of your manuals, of your engineering documents, of SAP can now be assembled together very quickly and spoken to.
The intranet is back, but it's got a voice interface and it's got all kinds of other interfaces. I just went to a week-long AI conference in Seattle where all the geeks were out. And there are all these enterprise companies now that are building the future intranet, and one of them actually even used that term, which I thought was hilarious. Debbie, you're going to have to go back to work. And then agentic AI is the big thing. So now it's no longer AI, it's all agents, where you have an agent that does something to you. Hey, whatever your agent's name is, please go take care of all this stuff for me. So we are entering the era of agentic AI. Sure. And Mustafa Suleiman's book talks about moving from IQ to EQ to AQ. And how it's got to feel us, love us, do all the things that we care about. You can watch a video. If you don't want to read his whole book, there's videos and you can summarize. But very thoughtful in terms of where we're going. But I would say you will start to see agentic AI in all of the tech news now, because that is the big thing that everyone is turning to, because it's like, should everyone have to become a prompt engineer and learn how to speak another language to talk to a computer, or should we have much easier interfaces where we just have an agent? I mean, Siri was kind of the first one in that direction, and then Alexa, but it's like, this should actually do everything for us. And so all the tool makers are both coming up with agentic AI in the inside the corporate firewall, the new intranet, as well as a personal agent that can help you with everything in your life.
So a no-regret move is to say, okay, I know you think we don't have any personal data like PII, like at Norton LifeLock we have a ton of personally identifiable information. So maybe you're at a company that doesn't have that, but you have to ask about the data, and then they say, well, we don't have to really govern our data because we don't really, then you have to say, well, wait, there's data now that's being assembled in one place that could be stolen much easier, and we're going to need a data infrastructure, a governance model. We're going to need that in place no matter what happens. Data becomes more important, even if you're never going to sell it. And you want to really lean on it. What happened in the report was, even though we're chartered with technology, we promoted data to be, almost every sentence that has technology, data has been promoted to that. So I think that's a no regret. Training your employees is a no regret move. And the other thing is addressing your legacy systems. It's almost like you're going to be in the Olympics, but you don't know what sport. When Jack talks about how fast it's going to go. And so what I mean by that is, some people, like if you haven't retired a mainframe, et cetera, if you're, like I'm in one board and we've never had a return policy. You buy our stuff, it doesn't ever come back. And now it comes back. And now we're thinking of renting it out. And it's something you don't rent. I mean, you buy this. And so we have to change the pricing model, the usage, things like that. If your IT systems are so brittle, you can't adapt quickly. And so you all know that there's debt, and no one ever wants to talk about that. So on the technology debt, I think that's something important that you need to take a look at. It's a no regrets.
I was going to ask a question about tech talent and board refresh as well. And I wonder, as you did your study, to what extent did you sort of talk about sort of what's going to happen with governance on boards? And every one of us thinks we are, and we're in California, so we tend to be labeled as the tech person and, sort of a bit out there, for some of our boards. But when I look in, I go, oh my God, we're going to have to shift. Sorry. So what is your sense of how much refresh you think there's going to happen on boards versus, also education as well? So you've mentioned a lot of education.
There's a whole section on that.
There is,
and
okay.
No, it's a great question. There's a whole section, and it's similar to your internal employees, right? The internal employees in the company, so do we just get rid of everyone who didn't graduate with a computer science degree in the last 5 years? Or do we retrain? How much do we need? And it's the same conversation in the board. And it's some training, and again, back to if someone didn't graduate really recently, this is moving so quickly that the question is, do you have agile learners? And to give you the summary of what it comes up with is, it's not what is your specific tech talent that you trained in, are you intellectually curious, an agile learner, and someone who is going to spend your weekends and Peloton time listening to webinars to stay up to speed on technology in so many areas and governance in so many areas. If you have board members who would never go to a event like this to learn and think they know everything from the job they had 30 years ago, maybe it's time for a conversation. And there was a long discussion of, do we need to change our performance reviews for directors to include a lot of, hey, how often are you updating your tech skills, is one of the questions, for example. Do we need to change those questions? How do we give feedback to board members who aren't doing constant education?
And investors are starting to ask and wonder, like, okay, I looked at that. I don't know if you have that and you're going to be one of the survivors. So I think it's incumbent as the head of NomGov is to have an education plan for the board. Comes up at least once a year. We decide if we're going to do it together or separate, and kind of parse it out. I think in terms of refreshment, it's been about the same as we go forward, but I think charters change, structure changes, agenda changes, you go to zero-based agenda setting. I think those things, and we're going to have the conversations. I think if you're not doing a really good board self-assessment, and then we do it to the individual members and to the committee and to the committee chairs and the lead director, if you're not doing that hygiene all the time, if you're doing it, some people sometimes select out. And they're like, wow, I'm going to self-select because when I see the grid of what you need, I don't have it anymore. But sometimes they don't, and then you have to do what you have to do.
Your chair needs to have a good discussion, or NomGov chair.
Yeah, and I think for you as directors, one thing to think about is in this time of change with technology becoming so important, it's your opportunity potentially to differentiate yourself, right? And actually show that you can add more value onto a board that maybe you want to get onto. So I think it really can be, you can be impactful as part of this. We have quickly run out of time. I would like to thank, first of all, our sponsors. Kumar, thank you. Nadia, thank you. And of course, Nora and Laurie, who are like, they could do this all night if we let them. And I'm sure they'll stick around to talk to you if you have questions. Appreciate all of you coming. Hopefully you found this informative. And certainly go out and read the report when you get a chance tonight. Before you go to bed. You better get it done. Yes. There's
Jack
a quiz.
Spent his weekend reading the report.
I'm watching you. All right, and thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure having you all here.